Hi, this is Emily Bowen-Moore. This is Journalism 273 in the Meek School of Journalism and New Media at the University of Mississippi. This is a tutorial that relates to the type tool in InDesign CC. And we use the type tool for many different things, but whenever we create a text box, and your type tool is over here where the T is, or you can type T for the shortcut. So if I go into my type tool, I can click and drag a text box any size I want. I'll make this one kind of small so you can see what happens if I go with too much information. And from that point, you can see your cursor starts to blink and you can start typing. And I have a couple of text boxes up here, and I'm going to go back to my selection tool so I can select one of these to work with. Depending on which text box you are working with in your document, you can select that box. And if I double click on that box, it puts me in access to the type within that box. So it's easy to go back and forth. Now, if I want to go back to my selection tool, I can just click outside the area, go back to my V, which is for my selection tool, and go to another text box if I want to double click and access that type. So if I do that, now I can select any part of this type that I want and adjust the color, I can adjust the size, I can do whatever type treatment I would like. And whenever we're working with type, if you go up in your panel and you look up here, you've got all your type options, but you also still have your color and fill. But since we are working with just our type, you will see it will be a T in your color box. And that differentiates from when we are treating the box like an object. So if we select the box in which the type is in, if you go back up here, it looks different. We're working with the box as an object instead of the type itself. So I want to make sure everyone knows the difference with that. And again, if we double click in here, let's look at what we can do with our type and our type boxes. If I make this box smaller, you'll see something happens here. I'll get this plus sign over to the right. And that means that I have too much type in this box that's visible. So there's more in here than what is showing at the moment. So I can either expand this box or adjust the treatment itself. And a lot of times, depending on what you're putting in your box and how you're adjusting your type, you might want to make your boxes a little bigger than what you need. And once you're finished with that particular text box, then you can reduce the size down to make it more even and easier to align with other elements on the page. Now, you also have in your text tool here, your type tool, you have another option that's called type on a path. So let's talk about that for just a moment. Now, that allows you to type along any path that you create. So you have to create your path first. Now, you can do that freehand. So let's say I get my pencil tool over here, and the asterisk means that it's ready to create a path, basically, the asterisk that's next to your cursor. So let's say I want to create a wave. Let me do that better. There we go. So let's say we create this path. Now, you don't have to create a fill, or you don't have to create an outline. Now, when we click off of this, it's not going to show because we don't have anything defining it in terms of color or weight of a line. But we just need to create our path here. Now, if you want to create a stroke just while you're working with it and then delete it later, you can. Now we're ready to go back to our type on a path tool. So once we're in our type on a path tool, we can go over to the path that we created and click on that path, and you will see that the text goes along the path that we created. So you can see that that follows. And we can go back to our selection tool and select that line and delete the weight. And you can see from a print preview, that's what it would look like. That's where our line was, our path. So you can do that freehand, or you can create a path using one of your shapes. So if I go to my rectangle tool, or let's create an elliptical arch, I'm going to hold down my Shift button so I can create a perfect circle here. Alright, here's our path. And I can, it's a little bit crowded here. It's going to be pretty acute. So I'm going to still work with it. And I'm going to add a stroke to this just for the moment so we can see the line. And I'm going to go over here to my Type on a Path tool. And I'm going to click down here first. And you can see that it follows our path. Okay. And I want to show you something else that you will see on this. Now, if I go back to my selection tool, if we, let me zoom in so you can see this. You see these boxes here. There's actually two here. You can see the lines that go with them. These are basically representing the beginning and the end of this path. So say I decide I want the beginning of this to be more towards the top of this ellipse. So instead of having to click into the type and adjust with my space bar, this saves us some time. If I just click on this line here, you can see how it has an arrow now on my cursor. I can push that along. So here's my beginning. Oops. So I can push this to wherever I want it to start and end. Now this represents the end of this path. So if I go too far and I run out of room, it's going to do what a normal text box does. It's going to give me my plus sign, which means I need to either start another text box to continue that type, or I need to expand the box itself. But these little bars help tremendously when you're deciding where you want your type to begin and where you want it to end. And you can access that with your selection tool. Now I can also go into my direct select tool and modify this as well. Like I can modify this path and change the path and make it a little bit more irregular, more egg-shaped, if you will. You also have these handlebars off of these anchor points, and those adjust the arch of the curves that you're working with. You can slide them and expand them out and inward, or you can turn them and create more acute arches or less acute arches. So you have control over your different anchor points along that path with your direct select tool as well. Okay, so your type tool has two options. It has a regular type tool and a type on a path tool. So sometimes, depending on what you are doing with your work, you have several options here. Okay, so thanks for listening.